The NFL Combine is here, and there are 7 Ohio State players that'll be in Indianapolis showcasing their skills in what I call the Underwear Olympics. Here with me today is Ryan Roberts from RiseandDraft.com. He's going to break down what we can expect from 7 Ohio State players that will be performing during the Combine. You can hear it all right here on today's show of Locked on Buckeyes.
You are Locked on Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Buckeye fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked on Buckeyes, part of Locked on Podcast Network. I am your host, Jay Stevens, also the host of the Jay Stevens Podcast. It is Wednesday, March the 2nd in the year 2022, and today's episode of Locked on Buckeyes is brought to you by RunYourPool. March Madness is here, and RunYourPool has a better way to create your bracket. RunYourPool.com, the premier sports pool hosting service. Yes, Ryan Roberts, I've been teasing him for like a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks. He is back. There's an Irish breakdown flag behind him. Please don't tune him out just yet. We're still looking forward to that game on September the 3rd when Notre Dame comes to the shoe. But today, he's not the Notre Dame guy. He is the NFL scout that we will all love, as he is here to break down what we can expect from Ohio State players in the NFL Combine. Ryan, welcome back, man. It's been a while.
I know, Jay. It's been a long while, man. It's good to be back. I guess I should have hid the flag while I could have, brother. But I appreciate you as always for having me on, man. It's a ton of fun always.
Yes, it is. It's always fun. Ryan, I do say it kind of jokingly, but it is true. He is my favorite NFL draft scout. Not only have we done numerous shows together, but he's good to follow on Twitter. We joke around every now and then. But what's not a joke is what to expect, what we can wait to see from Ohio State players: Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Jeremy Ruckert, Nicholas Petit, Ferrer, Munford, Haskell Garrett, and Tyrek Smith in the NFL Combine. The only Buckeye that's draft eligible, it's in the NFL draft, that is not going to the Combine, didn't get an invite, is Master Teague. Not surprised by that at all. I thought he was going to transfer or stay in school, but he decided to go to the draft. So be it. But from these 7 guys that are going to be in the Underwear Olympics, Ryan, just this group as a collective unit, what are you most excited about seeing from these Ohio State players?
I think it's a really good group, and especially at the wide receiver position. You know, I feel like there's been some people, and I've definitely seen it more recently, especially because I feel like Chris Olave has just kind of been the name that's been on the top of people's heads for a long time, right? But I feel like Garrett Wilson, for me, is the superior prospect. But now there's been just kind of some jockeying back and forth between who is the better prospect, who isn't. I'm curious to see how each of them test, because I wonder if there is going to be some type of separation, because I feel like there is a reality where Chris Olave might run a little faster in the 40, but Garrett Wilson may test better in like the short area stuff. So it's going to be an interesting conversation. And I think that, just seeing what type of athlete guys like Jeremy Ruckert are, who were kind of underutilized. Tyrek Smith, who was productive, but also a part of the rotation, obviously, his entire time during Ohio State. What type of athletes are those types of players who may have higher upside on the next level than what they were in college, just based upon athletic traits? And it should be interesting just to see the separation and what type of athletes these guys are that maybe didn't have the college production that you would want, but maybe have more upside moving forward.
This, to me, when it comes to Ruck, we're going to hit him first. This is kind of an area and a platform for him to explode, to kind of showcase that he is athletic, even though, as you said, he was underutilized at Ohio State. And I've even documented it here on this podcast for the 2 seasons that I've been the host of it. He has been underutilized. But even though he's been underutilized, there is an NFL team that I think has their eyes on him. And this is a great way for him to prove to them, even though he didn't perform at a high level in catching the ball in college, he could do that at the next level in the National Football League.
Yeah, no, and he's a really interesting player. Obviously, he was the top-ranked tight end by most recruiting platforms coming out of New York. Everybody knows, he was a bordering 4-star, 5-star, depending on the recruiting platform when he was coming out. And he's 6'5", 250-plus pounds. He obviously looks the part, to say the least. And when he had Jay opportunity, in my opinion, he did capitalize. I feel like he has strong hands. He's got a strong frame winning above the catch. I think linearly, he's a pretty explosive kid as well. I'm looking forward to seeing what type of separator he could be. And that I think you'll be able to determine that a little bit. Obviously, him running routes, even though it's on air, but also seeing the short area stuff. What's the short shuttle look like? How can he flip his hips and change direction in the 3-cone? What is the upside maybe as a route runner? Because I felt like most of his stuff was very linear, coming off of play action, hitting the seam, that type of stuff. And I think that he can do that. But I think seeing what the upside is, because I think that he has a baseline to being a contributing NFL player. But I think the question is, what is the upside with a player like him? He reminds me a little bit of like how Tommy Tremble was used out of Notre Dame a couple years ago when he came out. And he ended up being a 3rd-round pick by the Carolina Panthers because his upside was more than the production was in college, because he was not a featured pass catcher in Notre Dame's scheme. And I feel similarly to how Jeremy Ruckert is. I feel like Jeremy Ruckert could be a serviceable to solid blocker in line and both playing as an H-back and maybe even some fullback at times. I think he has good linear ability. I think he's got really strong hands. Is he the type of athlete that can be a little bit more, that have a little more of an advanced route tree? Because I think that he has a baseline to being a contributor. The question is, does he have starter level traits? And I think that we'll begin to see a little bit of athleticism on display.
I know this is the combine related, but we're going to look ahead to April really quickly, Ryan. Where do you see Ruckert going as it stands right now in the draft? What round do you think he'll go?
I think 3rd to 4th rounds, because I think that one thing that he has working for him right now is the fact that it's not a great tight end class at the top. I think there's a good amount of depth for the mid rounds. But, I mean, there's Trey McBride from Colorado State, who is the assumed leader in the clubhouse. We'll see kind of how he tests to really kind of put a stamp on that stock. But then you have a lot of guys that I think aren't separated by much. You know, you got to have guys like Isaiah Likely and Jalen Weidermeyer out of Texas A&M. And there's a lot of names in that middle tier, but who is the separator in that group? And I feel like Jeremy Ruckert, if he tests well, could be the guy that's maybe the 3rd, 4th tight end off the board. Like, I think that that's very much in his wheelhouse. And if he is, I think that he can go somewhere on late day 2, because I think that some people are going to bank on the upside. And I think that, again, the combine is a big test for him, because if he goes out there and he runs 4.6 high at 250 plus pounds, he has good lower body explosives. Buddy. It is moving, but like, I mean, the guy was a gifted athlete, obviously, coming out of high school. So, like, I mean, 4.6, 4.7, I'm expecting something in that ballpark. And I think that he can separate himself in this tight end class as far as like the middle tier, because I don't think that there's a consensus right now of who that next guy is. I really don't think there is one.
I was thinking more of low 4.7s, maybe 4.72, maybe 4.73, which, I mean, somebody might say that's slow, but if you get the average human being out there to run a 40, they're not running a 4.7 anything. And so a 4.7 to me for Ruckert is fine. If he runs like a 4.68, like 4.67, I'll be like, my eyes might pop out of my head because of how big he is doing it at 255. Wilson and Olave, to me, is an interesting one, because as you know, there's speculation who is better. Olave, a fan favorite, has been played 4 years versus 3 to Wilson. Olave had his coming out party was against Michigan, which also people love that as well as Buckeye fans. But people have been saying, many people saying Olave is better than Wilson. I've been on the train, Wilson better than Olave. Where are you at? And then also kind of double this with you. When it comes to the testing, who might I think you hinted at it earlier, but if Olave does test better, where does he test better versus Garrett Wilson?
Yeah, no, I'm not only Wilson over Olave guy, I'm also Wilson wide receiver 1 in this class. I've been a huge fan of Garrett Wilson since the summer, and it is continued, because I think that he is a 3-level separator. I've seen him be able to win after the catch. I've seen him win and I've seen him win in the air. And I think that he has really strong hands. I think that his hand measurement's going to be pretty crazy, to be honest. I think it's going to be upwards of not 10 inches for a guy that is a shade under 6 foot. Like, he's not the biggest guy in the world, obviously. So I think the hand strength is really impressive for a smaller guy. Chris Olave brings what I consider a really nice baseline as a wide receiver, right? Like, he's crafty. He understands how to attack blind spots. But I think that the route runner that he is, I think it overshadows a little bit, in my opinion, that Garrett Wilson, I think, is the better route runner, to be honest with you. Like, I think that he's more explosive out of breaks. I think that he is a guy that he just lives in blind spots, man. And he makes guys look absolutely silly running routes. Yeah. So he's my fan favorite. Testing wise, I expect Chris Olave to run a little bit faster in the 40. I would say 4.4 low for Chris Olave, maybe like 4.42, 4.44, somewhere in that ballpark. I think that Garrett Wilson is more high 4.4, like 4.48 to 4.5 flat, somewhere in that ballpark. Because I don't think that Garrett Wilson's the most dynamic downfield threat as far as just straight line speed. But I think that he is much more explosive than Chris Olave. Like, I imagine his broad jump is going to be better. I mean, he has to have a 40-plus inch vertical. I still think about that. What was that against Clemson, right?
Yeah.
A few years ago, third or freshman year. It's like that kid has to have just this silly vertical, silly broad jump. He's more explosive than Chris Olave. I think Olave is going to do fine in like the short area stuff, but I think that Garrett Wilson has him there as well. So I think Garrett Wilson is just overall the better athlete, but I think that Chris Olave might test better as far as what the straight line speed is.
How is this type of event ideal for Olave, who I don't think anybody thinks is the consensus or is the overall pick on anybody's board as far as a prospect, as far as like when it comes to wide receivers? But how is this event ideal for him to remind everybody that he can still get it done on the football field?
Well, if he does something that takes us off guard a little bit, because like I said, like I'm expecting a pretty solid 40. I'm expecting everything to be pretty solid from a short shuttle 3-cone perspective. But I mean, if he goes there and he maybe puts on a little bit of weight, because that's like one big thing about him, right? So he has a really slender frame. So you're going to question the play strength a little bit at times. If he goes there and he's more rocked up 190 plus pounds and he verticals somewhere close to 40 inches, like 38 inches, then you start to like second guess yourself a little bit like, is this kid a little more explosive than what I gave him credit for? Can his body hold that weight and maintain that level of athleticism? Because I think it's just changing narratives at the combine, right? It's always about its verification process for scouts, but also it's a double check yourselves for scouts too, right? Like if those guys go there and they do something that takes you off guard and that you're not expecting, that's when you have to go take a second look at the tape. Maybe there's glimpses of play strength that you didn't see from a Chris Olave. Maybe there's more explosiveness in short areas that you didn't see on tape that maybe was there at times, but it just is not consistent and can be more consistent. So I think it's doing something that is a little outside of the norm and it's a little not expected. And I think that that's where the change in the narrative comes from, because he just does something that catches your attention that you're not expecting from him.
Would you put much stock into the bench press as far as like a guy who's slender doing the bench press? And let's say the reps are, I don't know what you're projecting his reps being, but if he does more reps in maybe your projection, would you think that's a great way to say maybe he's a little more sturdier than we expected?
I think it's a good sign that he's been in the weight room, that he's put the work in. I think that more often than anything, seeing a guy that attacks the bench press and attacks just weightlifting in general shows that he is that guy that is very concerned with getting better, right? Like the preparation is important to him. I don't necessarily tune into the numbers as much on the bench press. Like it's nice to see guards and centers, the guys with shorter arms who, have to move and gain extension to like have some good play, some good weight room strength a little bit. But a wide receiver, I mean, like you're not pressing during when you're running a route or anything or gaining separation, so it's not really translatable to him as a football player. So I don't care much about the number, but again, if he shows up rocked up 190 plus and he looks the same and he's showing that he could throw weight around a little bit, I think it's a pleasant surprise that like, hey man, he's working on his game, he knows, and he's putting in the necessary reps and time into it to improve in those areas. So I think that can speak volumes, but I'm not necessarily tuned into if Chris Olave does 10 to 15 reps. Like that number doesn't change my opinion at all. I think it's just more the perceived the process he did to get there, if that makes sense. Like I want to see how he got there. What is kind of resonating with him throughout the process? Because I think that a guy needs to be very self-aware that like if I'm Chris Olave and I'm watching film, I hope that he understands that like I need to be a little more physical at the line of scrimmage. I need to be a little more physical winning down the football field, and that shows me that there's a little bit of self-awareness to him to make that decision.
The offensive linemen in this whole little combine underwear Olympics ordeal, it's not ideal for them. It's not the type of environment where they're hitting bags or they're running 40s or doing the vertical jump or the broad jump, and they're doing all these tests that you normally want to do for skilled positions. The one thing they might excel at is the bench press, but if they have longer arms as offensive linemen, you're not really winning that battle either. How does the combine affect or impact the draft status of Petit, Ferrer, and Thayer Munford?
Well, I'd say you mentioned underwear Olympics. I think it starts all at the weigh-ins, right? Like you just want to see body composition. You want to see what a guy looks like, and you want to see that arm length. And I'm expecting based upon junior day measurements, I'm expecting Nicholas Petit Ferrer to have 34+ inch arms. I'm expecting Thyre Munford to have 35+ inch arms because that was the numbers that was thrown out to us. So, I mean, from there, as long as their body looks good, then they're checking a lot of boxes. From there, it's like you don't care what the 40 time is. You care about what's the 10-yard splits, what's the broad jump, because that does show some explosiveness out of stances and, kind of power on contact. Usually that's a little bit translatable. So all the drills definitely are not designed in a offensive lineman's favor, but like the stuff that's the short area explosion stuff still matters. And those measurements more than anything is a big plus.
Between those two guys, I know we're going back from combine to draft, but I want to get this comparison because one guy played out of position last year, and I still don't like that happening. Who do you think is the better pro prospect between those two offensive linemen?
I mean, it's Nicholas Petit Ferrer to me. It's Thyre Munford, I thought, made a good decision. I think the coaching staff made a good long-term decision of him by pushing him inside because I think that he has stay power at guard at the next level. Like when we talked about it during the summer, like I was not a fan of the offensive tackle film, but he has a big frame, obviously. He has long arms. He has projectability inside. Nicholas Petit Ferrer, he's a better athlete, obviously, more gifted, coming out of Florida as a recruit. Like he had 5-star status, and his whole thing was like, can you gain weight on that frame because he came out really skinny, and you maintain it? Now, I still think that there's some cause for concerns with him because I think that the weight is better, but I'm not sure that the power is kind of translated to that weight gain. I still think there's power profile that needs to improve with him, but he's a better athlete and he plays a position that is more important, obviously, as a true offensive tackle. So I think that his upside is a little higher, and I definitely think he's going to be drafted higher than Thyre Munford.
For Munford, where do you think he'll be long-term in the NFL, tackle or guard?
He's a guard. I think it's valuable for him that he's had reps at tackle. So if he is a backup guard, for instance, it's nice to have a guy that has starting experience at multiple spots because that's stay power, right? Like that's how a guy makes a roster if he is able to back up multiple positions. So I think it is valuable for him that he's played offensive tackle, but I just think from a stylistic perspective, body composition perspective, he's a much better player inside a guard if you're developing to eventually play in that spot to start eventually, hopefully. But I think that it is valuable that he's played multiple spots, but I definitely think that he's better suited inside for sure on a full-time basis.
We are here with Ryan Roberts from riseanddraft.com. I joke about it, but it's true. He is my favorite NFL draft scout. Ryan, we got two guys left here, Haskell Garrett and Tyrek Smith. Tyrek Smith, a little bit slender, more of a defensive end. I think he weighed in at the Senior Bowl at 245. Haskell Garrett got injured, I do believe, in the Senior Bowl. I think he still played in the actual game, may have missed a day of practice. But these two guys, specifically Tyrek Smith, to me, both of them, I can't just say not one, only one. They both need this. Like, they're both trying to do anything they can to move up the draft boards. Injuries have gotten Haskell Garrett some inconsistent play. You mentioned Tyrek Smith being in the rotation. What is this week for these two gentlemen?
Yeah, I think that if we're starting with Tyreke for one, he had an up and down Senior Bowl week, but I thought that there were really good moments. Like you just kind of kept seeing him and Trevor Penning from Northern Iowa going back and forth and them kind of getting the brawl stuff. But the reason that Penning was, taking out on him in a couple reps was because Tyrek Smith was winning some.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, he was.
He was doing a nice job, in my opinion. Now the size is a little weird because I thought he was listed in the 250s throughout the last couple seasons. So he came in a little lighter, which was a little bit of a surprise. I think it's probably, hey, you've seen me at defensive end throughout most of my career. I can also play in space potentially as a 3-4 outside linebacker, so I can do some stuff standing up. So I think he's just trying to show a little bit of versatility, which I'm okay with. Whether it's working from a 3-point stance, 2-point stance, that's all well and good. We've seen him play at a higher weight, so I'm not worried about the weight gain at all. Like I think he can get up to 250 something easy and be able to maintain it. But his biggest thing, in my opinion, was I think his first step is solid, and I think he has really good hand usage, right? Like I think that he's able to disengage at the top of the track, and I think he's a hand winner. He's not a fully diverse athlete where I think that he's I don't think there's anything dynamic about him where he's just going to win the edge just because he's the best athlete in the world, but I think that he's a good hand winner, and I think that he has some slipperiness to him as a rusher. Now, this week is huge for him because if he goes out there and he has a stellar performance, a stellar workout, then we're talking about him going a little bit higher because he might be a better athlete than we're giving him credit for, because I think that he has the baseline as far as being a technically refined winner with his hands and with his get off. But I think that seeing a dynamic athlete, maybe he can work in space, make himself a little more scheme diverse, I think that's where Tyrek Smith could win in this week. Let's have a nice week of testing. Haskell Garrett, I don't expect anything flashy as a tester, just like I don't expect anything flashy when he plays football, man. But he's a good football player.
I like that. I like that.
He is, man. Like, he's a guy that is 6'2", 300 pounds, 32-inch arms. Like, nothing stands out about him. But every time you watch Ohio State, he's in the backfield. He's causing havoc. If he's not making a tackle for loss, he is forcing a gap over and somebody else is going to come clean it up. Like, he's just a good football player. And he might not have the traits where he's ever a full-time starter at the next level, but he's a kid that I think a team's going to get on day 3 at 4th, 5th, 6th round, somewhere in that ballpark, and he's just going to play football for him for a long time, and there is nothing wrong with that. He might not have starter traits, but his film is rock solid. He's a little bit of an older prospect, which people are going to hold against him, certainly, and I don't think that he's going to do anything in Indianapolis where you're going to say, like, wow, Haskell Garrett was a big winner of the week, but just check boxes, man. Keep checking boxes because you've been a productive player over the last couple of years. He's obviously a resilient football player coming back from getting shot in the face and playing in the season 2 years ago. Like, obviously a hardworking, resilient kid who's had some production in spurts. The question is he an athlete to maybe be a starter down the road? I don't necessarily think so, but like, there's no reason that he can't be like Devon Gottschall, who was drafted by the Miami Dolphins, who I think is on a different team now, but like, he's just stuck around in the NFL as a explosive attack style defensive lineman that doesn't have a ton of length, but like, he's going to cause some havoc because his first step is good. He's a little bit slippery and he plays really hard. And I think that there's a baseline for a guy like a Haskell Garrett to play a lot of football, maybe not anything flashy again, but he's going to play football on the next level, in my opinion.
Do you think that with Haskell Garrett and from things you said, I keep going back from combine to draft, but do you think with what you've seen via the film from Haskell Garrett that him in a 3 technique, linebacker behind him, he's not getting the tackles, but do you think he does a good job of holding up and clogging up blockers so the linebacker's free to get the tackle?
There's going to be some limitations at the point of attack because he just has shorter arms, right? Like, there's just going to be some times where he's displaced out of gaps, and that's just more a body type perspective. Like, he at points he can hold the point of attack and he can do a solid job in that regard. But like, for me, he is a guy that you want an attack style defensive front, 4-man front, where you just take the shackles off and you say, you go, you cause havoc, and then we'll pick up anything that you kind of miss, right? Like, I think that he's an explosive 1-gap style player. I don't think you can hold him at the point of attack much. I don't think he can play in an odd man front working as like a 2-gap type of player. I don't think that he has just the arm length and just the physical profile to do that type of stuff. But if you're working in a 4-man front that's attack style that wants guys to play 1-gap, not 2-gap, and just get after the football a little bit, I think that he can do that very well. But to answer your question, I just don't think that that's his style. Like, he's just there's some limitations in that regard, but I think that he still has a role that is very valuable at the next level.
I'm going to do something I didn't plan on doing, but we have a little bit of time left. This is probably the shortest show that Ryan and I have recorded since the time that we've been doing podcasts together. Master Teague is not in the combine. I'm not surprised. I don't think you're surprised either. I'm more surprised that he's going and leaving Ohio State instead of staying at Ohio State or transferring out to play somewhere else. If it was Ohio State or bust, I completely understand why it's NFL draft right now. I don't know if he gets drafted. And it's not a knock against him as a person, just his skill set and what he's done at Ohio State and just his build. I personally don't see how he translates into being on a 53-man roster in the National Football League. Am I crazy?
Yeah. No, you're not crazy. I think obviously it's telling, right, that he's not one of the 324 guys that were invited to Indianapolis. Now, there's always going to be guys that are drafted that did not get that combine invite, so that's not a full-gone conclusion that he's not going to get drafted, but I don't think it's a good sign, obviously. The one redeeming quality that he has, because you mentioned, I mean, he's a guy that sat behind J.K. Dobbins, split carries there. He sat behind Travion Henderson, split carries there, so he's just never been the main ball carrier. He's had some production when he's gotten touches, but it's obviously just not been in a high volume of snaps. The question that I have, because I think he's been on Bruce Feldman's freak list over at The Athletic for 2 straight years, if I have that correct. And there's like been some crazy numbers thrown out there, like 4 threes in the 40, dude. Like, there's like numbers out there.
I was thinking like 4.5, 4.6. Like, maybe not 4.6, but like high 4.5. Excuse me. That's my projection. But if he's thinking like 4 threes, like, what does he know? Who is he talking to?
Yeah. Exactly. Well, I mean, all those Ohio State guys always test like crazy stuff, man. But yeah, if you go look at Bruce Feldman's free list, it was like 4.35 or something like that, and like a high vertical. So if he goes to the pro day and he puts up those types of numbers, you never know, man. Because there was, I mean, Kenny Nawangwa, I believe is how you pronounce it, came out of Iowa State last year. He was a backup to Breece Hall for a couple years. Really good kick returner, though. He ends up going in the 4th round because he ran like 4.29 at the pro day, and everyone's like, what the heck is this kid, man? Because at that point, Master Teague, I imagine, is going to be 220, 225 pounds. If he runs anywhere close to the 4.3s, then you're like, well, he could play some special teams, right? And he could do that. He could run very fast in a straight line at worst. So maybe we take a 7th round flyer on a guy like a Master T, even though the production wasn't there. So it's possible. I am on the same wavelength, though. I think in a realistic world, he probably isn't drafted. Comes into camp. He'll get a camp invite for sure. There's no doubt. He'll come in as a priority free agent. So there's no concern there. But if he's a guy that tests the way that Bruce Feldman predicts, it's not anything's off the table, man, because those are some freaky numbers. Those aren't good numbers. Those are like elite level athlete numbers. So if he does anything close to that, then I wouldn't be shocked if a team was like a late round flyer, like, hey, there's a couple running backs on the board. We want to bring in a guy that can play special teams. Let's take the kid that runs a 4.3 at 220 pounds. Like, why wouldn't we at that point? That's not a big investment in putting it into a guy like a Master Teague. So I think it's possible if he has a big pro day, but I think more than likely he's a priority free agent that's brought into camp.
Ryan, this has been fun, man. I mean, it's been a while. I kind of missed the whole back and forth we have. I'm looking forward to the NFL draft coming up because we can go a little bit more in depth than we did today with players like Alave, Wilson, Ruckert, et cetera, et cetera. But if you could, in the meantime, I'm sure everyone wants to follow you along as you're live tweeting while watching the NFL Combine. Could you let everybody know where they can follow you on Twitter and talk about the good stuff you're doing at riseanddraft.com?
Yeah, man, absolutely. So like Jay said, it's Rise and Draft, RASEN Draft. You can follow me on Twitter. RiseandDraft.com is the website as well. You're going to see a lot of Notre Dame content, but I promise if you're an NFL draft savant, you will love the website. You will love our database, our mock draft simulator, all the in-depth information, the scouting reports, a lot of good stuff. I am a recruiting guy by nature now, but I am a draft guy by trade. So come take a look at RiseandDraft.com, and I hope you guys enjoy.
And guys, you can follow me on Twitter at jstevens07. We're done here for this Wednesday. 2 more shows left. NFL Combine is now through the end of the week, through Sunday, I believe. Make sure you're watching NFL Network. Excited to watch these Buckeye players as they perform in front of coaches, scouts, executives, and as they showcase their skills to get drafted as high as they can in the upcoming NFL Draft.